Okay, Michael, we are live and you may begin whenever you're ready.
Great. We'll give it another, well, my clock just hit 7. I believe we have a quorum, so I'm going to start the meeting tonight. Welcome to the April 20th? April 20th Design Review Board full board meeting. We're going to get started here. I see that there is a quorum, so we're good to go. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
I have a second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have, hold on, let me make sure. I only heard 3 people. Bruce, Dan, are you guys there? I see you all.
I'm here.
I hear from Bruce and Dan. You said aye too?
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to make sure we do have a quorum. I saw we had one, but I want to make sure we actually do. All right, do we have any minutes to approve tonight, Seth? Looks like, yeah, oh, just from the last full board. Is there a motion to approve last full board?
So moved.
We have March 16th, March 23rd, April 6th minutes to approve.
Oh, okay, from all the panels. Okay.
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve all those meeting minutes that Jane just mentioned?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, the motion passes. All right, tonight we have a little bit of our own agenda to start. First, we have to do some design review board elections for this year coming up. I'm going to look for nominations and then we will either have discussion or take a vote. So a nomination needs to receive a second before we will vote on it. So first I will look for a nomination for chair.
I nominate Michael Wood.
We have a nomination. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And a second from Dan. All right. Let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone against? And I'll abstain from voting for myself. The motion will pass. I appreciate it. Thank you. I still don't ever know how I got in this position, but I appreciate it and I've enjoyed it. So I look forward to another year. We are now looking for a motion or a nomination for vice chairs. Are there any nominations for vice chairs? I will nominate Bruce for vice chair.
I'll second that.
I have a second. All those in favor of Bruce being a vice chair again, say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
All right, motion passes. Congrats, Bruce. You are vice chair once again.
Thank you.
We're looking for a nomination for another vice chair.
I nominate Dan.
We have a nomination for Dan Galindo. Do I hear a second?
Second that.
Second from Mike. All right, all those in favor for Dan being a vice chair, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
nays?
I'll vote for myself.
And any abstentions? No. All right. Motion passes for Dan to be a vice chair.
Thanks, everybody.
Do we have any other nominations for vice chair? I will nominate. Karen, you want to do it again?
Not really.
Okay. All right. Well, that's why I asked first, you know. Who are we? We're missing a couple people. Actually, I'm gonna nominate Mike for vice chair. He seems like he can run a meeting.
Fair enough.
I'll
Do I
second
have a
that.
second? We have a second. All those in favor for Mike being a vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
I'll abstain.
abstentions? All right. Motion passes. Congrats, Mike. Welcome to the vice chair. And I have on this note that we have a new DRB member, Jim, but I don't see him on yet. Is that correct, Steph?
I don't see Jim. I don't see him here either.
That's what I thought. Okay. I see one thing called iPhone. I don't know how he's calling in. So we do have a new member, Jim Lazowski, but I do not see him on yet. So maybe he will join us later.
I think iPhone is Jim. Jim, is that you?
Yes, that's me.
Great.
Hey, Jim, welcome to the DRB. Sorry you just missed the little voting there. But we're glad to have you, and we will move into tonight's agenda. So tonight we are starting with application. I have 1118 Saffold Way, 4118 Saffold Way. I believe this is an appeal. So I think we have all appeals tonight except the last one. So the way the appeal works is that you guys have to prove one of two things: was there a design guideline misapplied, or whether there's new relevant information. So the appellant will present their case, and we will need to either accept their case or deny the case. And then if we do accept it, we review the case. Denovo is the term, and basically it's all from the beginning. We review it, and anybody who was on the actual panel for the original discussion, the original decision, is not allowed to vote on the appeal, but they are allowed to vote on the re-review part of it. So I'm pulling up who's not allowed to vote on this one. I think it's me.
Dan and Mike B.
Oh no, okay. Dan and Mike B are not allowed to make a decision on the appeal. They'll just have to abstain, but the rest of us will be able to. So who is the actual appellant, staff?
The appellant is the
cluster, right?
No, that's the affected party. The appellant is the homeowner, the applicant.
Oh, okay.
Marquez,
the applicant is also the appellant. Okay, great. All right, I believe Michael Marquez is speaking on behalf of Mimi. So can we make sure he's unmuted? And then for the appeal, do we have a time limit, Cam? I can't remember.
No, we do not have a time limit for.
We do not have a limit. Okay, just checking. I have a note from Mike to unmute.
Hello. Everybody hear me?
Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
we can hear you.
Yes,
Yep.
indeed.
All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
My name is Michael Marquez. My mother is Uriel Marquez. She's the homeowner. She's on the call, I think. I just wanted to make sure that she's on the call.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. And Nathan is the affected party. He's representing the cluster. Just to make sure everybody's here. So I wanted to, so I used to live in Reston. I grew up in Reston, and I worked for Reston Association as a lifeguard and swim coach for many years. And I just wanted to say thanks to you guys before we get started here for doing what you do. You know, my mom is a homeowner, but as a person who grew up in Reston, I know how special it is, and your work is what helps keep it that way. So what we're doing here is, from my understanding, we're saying, I'm going to argue that there was a misapplication of design guidelines and that there's new and material information. I want to start though with some new information. It might go to both arguments here, but it's new information that is not in the brief that we submitted because it's come up more recently. But I want to send you guys a link. Can I send you guys a link through the chat?
I'm not actually sure, to be honest with you.
We're not actually, no, because we were not allowed to show information that has not previously been submitted.
Are you sending us to the guidelines basically for Hillcrest cluster?
Yes, but there's additional information in the fact that the cluster has proposed to amend the guidelines, and they posted the proposed amendments. The proposed amendments directly affect this case, and they posted the proposed amendments on their website on April 10. So we didn't have time to put it in the brief. But how would you guys like to proceed on this issue?
Can you give us a little brief rundown of what
Yeah, I can read it to you.
proposed of
I can just
are they
read it
new
to you.
guidelines that are
Sure
approved?
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can just read it to you. So there's two clauses in the guidelines that are at issue here. The first clause is having to do with cap flashing. Okay, it says cover the top of firewall separating of the roof of townhouses. Cap flashings like the brick exterior walls must be painted Saffold-Way beige and kept clean. Okay, and that language is in the brief. Actually, I think you'll see if you scroll down. And then there's the additional language which says, before making any change in the exterior of your property not included in your section-specific documentation, you must obtain approval from the Hillcrest Cluster Association and the Design Review Board. So I'm gonna argue here that what the cluster has done is a misapplication of the guideline regarding the cap flashing. And I'm going to read from you so just to give you a rundown of what happened, my mother put some cap flashing up on one section of the brickwork on the exterior of the property at 11118 Saffold Way in 2014, and the cluster took no action to enforce. So as a reasonable homeowner, anyone would assume that it wasn't a violation just from that action alone. In addition to that, in last year, in 2020, she added more cap flashing onto the brickwork that is an extension. Essentially, it's an extension of the separating of the wall that separates the units, 11.11.6 and 11.11.8. She got permission from the owner of 11.11.6 before she did that addition to the cap flashing, and you can see it there on the well, you can barely see it because it's painted the Saffold-Way beige, but it's on top of the brickwork there. So
which guideline are you?
Right. So here's
I understand what the issue is. I think we all know what it is, but I guess what's tricky is we need to see what guideline was misapplied or what new information. Now, the new information you're touching on, I don't quite understand what you're saying. What was new information about it that we maybe didn't have?
Right. Sorry. So here's the new information. The new information is that they propose an updated language to the cap flashing language. It says the updated proposal is cap flashings cover the top of firewall separating the roof of townhouses. Cap flashings must be painted Saffold-Way beige. All cap flashings should be kept clean. Cap flashing should not be incorporated in any other structural elements of the home, such as fences, walkways, handrails, etc. So my argument here is that this new information, it basically makes the case for us, because what it concedes one of two things. Either putting the cap flashing where my mother did wasn't a violation when she did it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to add this language to the guidelines. Or two, the proposal of the amendment to the guidelines concedes that the guidelines were ambiguous as to cap flashing in the first place. And when you have a contract clause that's ambiguous, you know from one of the basic, things in law school that you learn is that when you have contract clause that's ambiguous, you interpret it against the drafter. So my mother should get the benefit of any interpretation of the ambiguity of these guidelines. And from that perspective, as well, the cap flashing that she added is not a violation of the guidelines. So it's sort of two-pronged in that sense, is that it's a misapplication of the guidelines to say that the existing language in the guidelines means that the cap flashing is a violation. And because this new information shows that it's not a violation by trying to, shall we say, cover for the deficit in the clarity of the regulations of the guidelines. So that's some of the new information. Now, the other part of new information that I want to point out is there are other clusters in Reston that use cap flashing on brickwork. That's part of the separating walls between units. And one of them is Waterview cluster, which there's a photo. If you go down to page 8, you'll see a photo of a house in Waterview cluster where there's cap flashing on the brickwork that separates the two walls there. And I think one of the concerns from what I heard from the original meeting from the application is that there's a concern that this would set some kind of precedent, or there's a concern that, you know, by the way, and this is all just a way of maintaining the property, is the cap flashing, that this strategy to maintain the property is not being used elsewhere. And this is new information, we believe, that shows that it is being used elsewhere in Reston, and that it's not an uncommon strategy to mitigate the damage that's caused by rainwater runoff on the brick. And I also want to point out that it's in the brief, it's linked in the brief, but if you take a look at the handbook, for Waterview cluster, you'll notice that it doesn't say anything about cap flashing. So if that goes to the misapplication of the guidelines. See, in Waterview, where it says nothing about cap flashing, then it seems like cap flashing is allowed because people have it on their houses. And similarly, here in Hillcrest cluster, you know, the regulation, the guidelines say that you can have cap flashing on the roof line, but they don't say you can't have cap flashing elsewhere. And to some extent, I would argue that where my mother put the cap flashing is actually an extension of the roof line, because that part of the bridge is actually covering a shed down below. So it's really just an extension of the roof line, or an extension of the dividing line between the two properties, which is what they're doing here in Waterview cluster. They're putting cap flashing on the extension of the wall that divides the properties.
Okay, so you feel that the ambiguity of the cluster guideline itself is the misapplication of that guideline.
Well,
essentially,
I'm saying
it's not specifically not allowed, therefore it should, and even with their clarification, they don't clearly say you're not allowed to do it, that therefore you're saying the new information or the misapplied guideline was that we took their guideline out of context, essentially.
I think that is part of my argument, but I'm also saying that the fact that they're changing the guidelines is what basically shows that this was a misapplication of the guidelines, because the cluster is trying to change the guidelines to now apply them to the action that we already took. And that would just be very burdensome, unduly burdensome and arbitrary to allow that sort of behavior on the part of the cluster.
Okay. Well, I think we heard what you had to say. We need first a motion to accept the appeal. So is there any discussion? I know Mike and Dan cannot vote, but do you guys feel that when you guys applied the guideline, that it was clear that this was against the guideline and it just wasn't, misapplied or whatever it may be?
Excuse me. Yeah, no, I thought it was pretty clear at the time that the cap flashing as specifically installed was not in conformance with the cluster standards at the time, which I believe to be the intent of updating the cluster standards in their current maneuver. But again, that was the way we understood. Well, I'm not going to speak for Dan, but that's the way I understood it at the time.
I agree.
Okay. And obviously, I know the cluster wants to talk. I see them in the chat. You guys will have a chance to talk if we accept the appeal and we rehear the case de novo. There's no really point to hear you out right now unless the appeal is accepted, because right now you guys have the decision you want. So does anyone have any other thoughts? I mean, what's tricky here is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of other homeowners that have the exact same condition. so this issue is obviously going to come up, but we usually like the clusters to govern themselves. Is essentially what we're here, that if there is any kind of overall big design issue that maybe comes up, but this is more of an internal issue, in my opinion, that the cluster doesn't want it. There are different ways to handle water rather than doing cap flashing. You can do flashing under the first course of brick that you don't see. Obviously, they didn't install it that way to begin with, so it makes it a little trickier to do it after the fact. But I just don't see any new information that we have, and the ambiguity and pointing at other guidelines of other clusters doesn't really, it's not new information, because other clusters are allowed to do other things, in my opinion. Bruce, do you have anything? Karen, do you have anything?
My thought was that I read the clusters as not addressing this situation. And that, so from my point of view, if it was not there, then we couldn't, there wasn't a standard to misapply. That's the way, that's how I looked at this. And I thought that to the extent that they had added flashing in another place that wasn't specifically addressed in the current standard, and it wasn't deemed problematic, that was consistent with the notion that only flashing that's addressed is the flashing that's specifically cited in the cluster standard, and that everything else is, there was no specific cluster standard. So I thought that there was no cluster standard for this situation. So that would have been my notion of the misapplication, because there was no applicable cluster standard.
Okay. Karen, do you have anything to add?
I thought it was, that it was pretty clear. I mean, everybody else in the cluster seems to have understood. And so I didn't think that it was, I didn't think that it was something that was supposed to be there.
Okay.
Could I just
Jim,
ask,
yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
is this the only instance of flashing other than under the roof line? And I mean, that's what I'm understanding. That's what I'm hearing. Because there is an instance that they just identified in the application where, so I'm just not clear that it's been determined that there's no other flashing in the whole cluster other than the way it's specifically addressed in the cluster standard. I don't,
I'm not sure.
I mean, I don't know that. I couldn't.
Yeah, according from what I see from Nathan in the chat, the flashing is not located in this location on any other home in the cluster.
That wasn't the question. The question was, is there flashing added in any other places other than the location that's specifically identified in the cluster standard? Because this homeowner has added it to another place. So I'm wondering if any others did. And that goes to the question of whether it's the issue of whether the cluster
Go to image 27.
selectively applying its standard.
Yeah, so if you go where Mike's saying page 26 or 27, you can see there is some cap flashing. It looks like on that parapet, I don't know what it is, to the right of the balcony on the orange unit there. If you zoom in, you can see that's cap flashing there.
Yep.
I mean, to me, what we're trying to decide right now is the appeal. So if Bruce, if you think that there was kind of a misapplication, then let's put a motion out there so we can then discuss this further and talk about it and see if it passes. If not, then it dies and then it would go. So do you have a motion you want to put out there?
I would move to accept the appeal.
Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the appeal? Do we have a second? All right, so I think the motion dies. There was no second. Do we have a motion? Any other motion? I'll make a motion to deny the appeal on that. There is no specific new information or misapplied guideline. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? I see where you're coming from, Bruce.
It's interpretation, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, we could do that all day with everyone's guidelines and say if it's not in there, then you can't do it. But then, people do stuff all the time that aren't in their guidelines. So it's a little bit of a fine line of where can we draw the line. I want the tester to rule themselves. So we'll take a vote now. Mike and Dan, you cannot vote. So I need to hear a vote from Jim, Bruce, Karen, and myself, I believe. So all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We have an aye from Jim. Any opposed?
No.
Nay from Bruce. Nay. Sorry, my wording is out of work. All right. So the motion, the denial of the appeal passes 3-1, and that'll put that to bed. All right. We are moving on to application H, which is 2201 Milburn Lane.
And Michael, before we move to the next application, we need to do members' comments. If anyone had any.
Sorry. Are there any general member comments that are not applied to any applications tonight? I skipped that step. I apologize. If you have any general member comments, raise your hand. If not, we'll keep moving forward.
Nothing for me, Michael.
All right, great. So we're looking at 2201 Milburn Lane, which is an appeal. And I believe the appellant is Mr. Platt, if I am correct.
No.
No?
No, it's Sharon. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last name.
Oh, just kidding. I'm on the wrong. That's application J. We got too many appeals. All right. So yeah, Milburn Lane. So we have an appeal tonight. So is the appellant on and unmuted?
We are trying to unmute her now.
I've asked her to unmute. Let's see.
Sharon, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, there you go. Hey, Sharon. Hey, so you are appealing tonight the decision that we had. I believe that I and Karen are not allowed to vote on the appeal tonight, but you need to prove that there's either a misapplication of a guideline or new information for us to accept the appeal, just like the last case. So if you could please present what your appeal is, and we will go from there.
Yes, because Mr. Tivo, his drainage plan that provided for the previous 2 DRB meeting were incorrect. And even if you compare those 2 drainage plans, they're different. So I have to use his drawing and to the best of my knowledge to create another plan. And as you see, that's the plan. And in this plan, you can see that he's dumping all the water from his residence to my backyard, right? And as the DRB stated in the latest decision letter, there must be no alternation to drainage patterns that might detrimentally impact adjacent property or existing vegetation. But Mr. Tivo changed the drainage plan, the drainage pattern, and removed lots of trees. He diverted water from his residence via 5 amateurs using buried PVC downspout extension, results in the flow of all excess water and drainage into my backyard, including the water from the front roof and the sump pump. So when it rains, the rainwater runs like stream through the tubes directly into my backyard and creates puddles that will not dry for weeks. You can see from the picture, this is taken from the last snow, the latest snow, well, the very last snow. So you can see it's, kind of see the water flow. So he also removed lots of trees, added soil, made his terrain even higher, and likely caused the rainwater to run off into my backyard. Some of the trees he removed may not be on his property, but in the public area or even on my property. And his house already higher than the surroundings. If he still has water issues, as he stated, many things he could do to get his water issue resolved in his own property, such as adding mulch, doing aeration, planting more trees, fixing the basement leaking or foundation crack if there's any, because he mentioned about termite issues. And he can also direct the water to his front yard or to the other two sides. My point is, dumping all the water into my backyard is not the solution for him. And the work that Mr. Tivo has already done without pre-approval should not give him the right to be approved if it is not right. Otherwise, people will follow suit to do the same things. Just do it without pre-approval, and they think the DRB will approve it anyway afterwards. And I understand that it is not possible to go back to exactly the same as before. However, my request is to get it as close as possible, especially for the drainage. And, from this picture, I numbered the way he have the water out from his house it's close to my property lines, and I have very clear, and also in his drainage plan, he omit the, because he's getting the water from the front roof to the back. So like the decision for the last meeting didn't mention about those two from the front to the back. Those pipes, I want to be sure they should be removed, because if they are not removed, it might be reconnect in future, So I want to be sure the PVC downspout extension from the front to item 1 and 2 in the drainage plan will be removed. And the PVC downspout extension from the front to item 4 in the drainage plan will be removed too. So reconnecting the extension again in the future is prevented. And also what I would like to see is that, I accept the nature that water runs from high to low, but the way Mr. Tivo did is cannot acceptable. He has other ways to solve his water problem. It's not it's not a good thing that he solved his problem and it becomes my problem, and I will have water issues. So he can do his way in his own yard, like he can direct the water extension to the back, and then he can also do it to the front.
Okay. Yeah, ma'am. So I understand. So what I want to do is just see, from the information, for what I understand is from the last January meeting. No, so I went out there today because I know there was a request to go check it out. And so the work that we requested in this February letter here has not been done yet, because basically you appealed the decision. So you're still you're appealing this decision here that we were talking about moving the emitters back halfway. There was some other things, but you're saying the plan that he submitted is different, but it's because there has been no time to implement it yet. but you're saying that there was actually a discrepancy between plans. I'm just a little confused at what you're saying for that. So that's where I'm trying to get some clarification.
Yeah, I think move it halfway is not acceptable because the way if originally there is a concrete what is called the concrete downspout block, like when the house is built. So it's already have a distance from the house to the to get rid of the water. But if he moved it over to like halfway, it's still the water coming, like gathering all the water and it coming out right away, and it's all just dumping into my backyard. And you know, my backyard is like a repository for the water from his yard. So I accept nature, but doing this is not acceptable. And also because his house is already high, and thank to DRB for coming out on the field to do the investigation. I think I saw her yesterday. It's Karen, right? And when you investigate, you can see the direction of the water, like on the side close to 2203 Melbourne Land. That house is also lower than the house of Mr. Tivo's. So actually, Mr. Tivo's house is on top of the hill, and he can get rid of the water from all four directions. But he's dumping all the water to my yard, and it's good that he agreed to get the front roof water into his own front yard. But I want to make sure that he also get rid of the buried PVC tubes connection from the front to the back, because it's not mentioned in his drainage plan. It's not mentioned in the decision.
Well, yeah, and so I guess what I want to make sure I clarify is that I personally, so the plan, staff, could you go to page 5 of the drainage plan that we approved on January 26, 2021. So the one below this. So this was, the one before that was presented in November. He revised it, and then we had this one presented. This one still has yet to be implemented yet. However, what your marks here are stating what is, I guess, what is incomplete or wrong about this, because he hasn't had the chance to implement it yet. So I guess I'm a little, right now I don't see any new information, I guess is my point. So I want you to have a chance to explain what exactly is wrong with this plan. Are those the red marks that you put on this are from you, correct? In the circles?
The one, yes, with the numbers and the circles, well, with the numbers, that's done by me, yeah. And because in his plan, he didn't mention about the existing that he has done, the existing situation he has done, and that's incorrect.
Right. So, but you're pointing out the existing stuff, but he hasn't been allowed to do the stuff that we told him he needed to do. So I guess what I'm trying to do is what new information, the only thing that I see potentially that's new is, so if you go one slide, staff, slide 7, yeah, that big, long, dark blue line is saying existing extension of emitter from the front all the way to the back and connected to emitter 4. But if you, the plan above that is he's gonna relocate that and is gonna drain it out the front with the new plan. But he hasn't been able to implement the new plan because it's been appealed. So right now, from my point, I don't see any new information. But does anybody, Mike B, do you have anything to add?
No, I also took a stroll past here. I think you kind of summed it up nicely, Michael. I mean, this is the approved plan, not this sheet, but number 6, correct? I mean, it hasn't been implemented yet. So we understand the intent, obviously, is to not allow for the drainage to leave the parcel in question, but we haven't seen that this proposed drainage system doesn't work. I think he's making the effort to come with a system that would achieve the goal. So I don't see anything new here because it hasn't been installed yet, quite frankly.
Dan, Dan, do you have anything? Sorry, man. We're just going to go through because we have to whether accept the appeal or not, and then we can talk about the application again. We have a long agenda tonight, so I got to keep things moving. Dan, do you have anything?
I think y'all's comments clarified something I was thinking about, so I'm okay right now.
Okay. Bruce, did you have anything?
No, I don't have anything additional.
Jim, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Okay. Karen, do you feel, are you in agreement with me kind of on this? On where?
Yeah, I think it's premature because, and there was also the thing I thought was really important is moving of running the downspout from the back side, the back corner to the front yard corner.
Yeah, because those two front ones, we basically said, hey, we need you to put those, or he offered to put them to the front towards the street, basically. And
Right.
I think that's right now they're going to the back still. So I think that's going to be huge.
And there was supposed to be some trees and things added.
Yeah, and when I walked there, that was exactly the wet spot. Was right where we suggested to plant those trees in the mulch pit and all that stuff. So I cannot make a motion. Karen cannot make a motion. Does anybody have a motion?
I'll move to deny the appeal.
All right, we have a motion to deny the appeal.
I'll second Bruce's motion.
We have a second. So all those in favor are there any further discussion? With all this said, once it's implemented, if the water issue is still an issue, we put every note in our decision that says if water is still detrimentally impacting it, she still has every right to come back and be able to, it's not really technically an appeal, but it's an adjustment down the line that we might require another application from the homeowner. So I think, ma'am, we're gonna hopefully try to solve your issues for you. And I'm hoping that once he implements these new plans, that's where we'll stand. But let's take a vote on the denial. All those in favor say aye.
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 Actually, Michael, you
can't vote.
You and Karen.
Oh, I can't vote. Sorry, I can't vote. Sorry. All those in favor say aye. Sorry, let's redo that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Me and Karen. All right, the motion passes for denial. All right, moving on. We will go on to 11514 Hickory Cluster. And for this, I believe the cluster is the appellant.
That is correct.
I'm pulling it up. Do we have the representative from the cluster who will be presenting their appeal?
Yes, I believe the president is, we have several affected parties on the application, but the president is the one who submitted the appeal.
So just before we get started, so if I get my order of operations right, if we accept the appeal, then we'll rehear we'll rehear Denovo, and then we'll hear the affected parties, and then we'll go from there, correct? Is that the right order? Okay. All right. So do we have the cluster president on that can present the appeal?
Yes, my name is Sylvia Merrill. I'm the cluster president. We have, we would like to appeal the approval that you did back in March. We actually do have a slideshow that we handed in. Okay, and we'd like for Michael Poss to go ahead and speak for the board. We are allowing that at this time. So if Michael Poss could be unmuted. He is the one who compiled this slideshow for you to address this approval.
Great, can you hear me?
Yep, and Michael and Sylvia, I just want to remind you guys, you either need to show proof of a misapplication of a guideline or new information. So I'm assuming this presentation exactly is going to do that for you all, but I just want to remind you guys that's what we're looking for. So go ahead, Michael.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Great. Since there are so many new DRB members, I wanted to start briefly from the beginning to give you important context. Hickory Cluster was part of the original First Village. It's Charles Goodman designs, and original as-built design intent is crucial. Next slide, please. No, that one, yes. The original Reston brochure ironically shows the townhome in question. Go back one, please. It's one of only 7 C models out of 3 types, A, B, and C. It's the center one there, denoted by the red triangle. Again, that's the original Reston brochure, so it was important for many reasons. Next slide, please. In fact, even recently, Hickory Cluster has been deemed eligible for, or potentially eligible for, the National Register of Historic Places. So again, design intent and architectural design here are very important. Next slide, please. In fact, if buildings lose their architectural design integrity, they're considered ineligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Next slide, please. One of the main issues we have with the DRB decision is that, unfortunately, it neglected to take into consideration Hickory Cluster Association General Resolution 4 window replacement. This is a cluster standard approved and to be enforced by Reston Association DRB. Within that document, homeowners are required to receive permission from the Board of Directors of Hickory Cluster Association. Window unit must be the same size as the existing window unit, must match the original design intent. And unfortunately, the changes to the windows on this important property do not comply with those rules. Next. Also, the RA design guideline for doors requires that the location of a door must be architecturally appropriate. Now, I don't know about you, but this sticks out like a sore thumb to me, and especially on an important property where the roof line all across all the units is important, and in fact was called out to be very important property at the beginning of the development of the cluster. So in this illustration, you see the rendering of the 7-unit Model Cs, along with juxtaposed atop is a reduced version of the existing design that puts a roof door in its modification. So it does not comply with RA's design guidelines for doors. Next, please. Also, the RA design guideline for additions and alterations says that you got to consider any adverse impact on neighboring properties. Well, guess what? This new sun deck allows views down into the bathrooms of the adjacent properties. This was called out in a letter, affected party letter, from the one of the adjacent neighbors. In the slide, you can see at the far left, the actual bathroom area, and to the right, the corresponding kind of clerestory space above it, into which the occupants of the new sun deck can view the bathroom essentially on both sides. So one neighbor definitely called it out, and I'm sure it would impact the other neighbor. Next slide, please. There is a precedent for rooftop modifications. There was a 1998 DRB decision that allowed an upper deck, it's a double deck, side-by-side deck, balcony, to be built out into a different config, one of the previous configurations of a Goodman house. This was not actually constructed until 2011. And when they did that, they changed it and tried to build the roof on top of the beams as opposed to building it flush with the beams. And we appealed that decision, and the RA enforced Goodman original as-built design intent for roofs and roof modifications. Next slide, please. Now we've also got a planter box issue. Just for context, Model C Goodman houses have no planter boxes on them whatsoever. And in fact, there are none at ground level on any Model A or B either. And they're only in evidence if they're integrated into mid-level balcony railings in designs for row house Model Bs. So you can see mostly to the right there, an example of what a flower box should look like that's fully integrated, part of the original design intent, instead of something added on later as a permanent fixture that really shouldn't be there. Next slide, please. Here you see an image of the existing flower pots, the permanent planter boxes attached to that middle model C2. The original Goodman drawing shows no such planter boxes on any model C, and in fact on any ground floor unit throughout the cluster. So next slide, please. We're concerned this really isn't a roof repair or maintenance project, and the medical disability is not really an issue. It's pretty much a Sun Deck addition project instead. There are two homeowners here. One is the gentleman who made the presentation last time, and then his co-homeowner. He is a professional contractor. He is fully able to go up and clean his roof. We would think that he could put an operable window to comply with the cluster design guidelines for windows, or like a whole lot of other cluster homeowners, hire a contractor to put a ladder up on the outside of the unit and go up and clean the roof a couple of times a year, like we pretty much always all have to do. Next slide, please. So here's the summary. The design guideline in this case, in terms of the RA cluster standard that was not followed, is for hickory cluster windows. The cluster continues to enforce that guideline on other properties. And if you basically disapprove it and allow something that goes against the cluster guideline to pass, it contradicts the standards, the applications, the approvals, the enforcement process, and it really undermines the whole ball game here. The door violates the RA design guideline for appropriate location and has no precedent throughout the cluster, none whatsoever. The added ground level planter boxes are inconsistent with the original Goodman as-built design intent. And so we're asking the next slide, please, that you support the Goodman original as-built design intent, you support architect Goodman's architectural integrity, support cluster standards, which RA approved and should enforce, support our approval requirements, which require cluster approval for any changes in windows, which in turn supports our property values, and we ask that you disapprove this application. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael. Very thorough case. Does anyone have a motion just right off the bat? I personally feel that guidelines were misapplied on this one. Not only the hickory cluster, but also just a general aesthetic design guideline for all of Reston. I think I was the only one who voted no on this application. But does anyone else have any other feeling on it one way or the other, or am I okay to make a motion? I'll take the silence as nothing. So I'm going to make a motion to accept the appeal.
Second.
I have a second from Bruce. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Mike and Dan, I don't know if I heard your votes. Mike, you abstained?
I'll abstain from it, yep.
Dan, what did you vote?
I'm going to abstain as well.
Abstain as well. Okay, so motion passes. We'll accept the appeal. All right, so now we'll hear the case de novo, which basically means we'll rehear the submission from the applicant, and then we will hear the affected parties. So is the applicant on?
Yeah, so we're unmuting now. Can you hear us?
We have to
Yes.
talk or?
Yeah, so welcome back, guys. So the appeal
Hi,
was
guys.
accepted, which basically means we will review the application de novo, which it'll be start from the top essentially. So we're all obviously pretty familiar with it because we all heard it once. I think there was a couple of people maybe missing last time. I think maybe Bruce wasn't here. I don't know if someone else, I know Jim is new. So give us a brief rundown of what's going on. We obviously just saw the presentation, so we all know what's happening, but if you could walk us through your application, and then we'll hear from the affected parties once we hear your application. So go ahead.
So it's our turn, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, we didn't prepare very well for this meeting because everything we saw in their appeal was what they said in the first time. With nothing new, nothing stands except the design is changed. Everything else doesn't stand. So let's go one by one. First, the most important, which I don't accept, and I got offended by, where they say from our rooftop we can see our neighbor's bathroom. Clearly, if you see between two townhomes, it's like 5 feet, 6 feet wall. First. Second, if our neighbor is very aware, somebody can see her from going over the wall or whatever, she, I think, has to close all the townhomes in front of her house, which they have a lot clearer view than we do. That is first. Second, the windows. One of the affected parties, and the only one affected party except the HOA board, our neighbor, changed the windows 12, 15 months ago. I asked Michael, and I think Michael is the guy who HOA members removed him from president. I think he's the guy. I'm not sure, but I think he's the guy. I'm asking him and Sylvia, did she apply for permit from HOA and DRB to remove her windows in same place we removed and are exactly the same windows? This is my question for the HOA people, who they want to be very architectural, strict, everything. For the third, I don't think our house and our changes on top of the roof can remove the chance from Hickory Plaza to get in that historical thing, because in Hickory Plaza, people build rooms. They close the decks and build rooms. In fact, 5 or 6 townhomes. I can take pictures and I can send it to you. So if something in a ruin the chance is that one, not our middle roof changes. I don't agree with him because I'm a contractor, I can go to the roof. First of all, in a roof you cannot go because you need 40-foot ladder. I'm asking Michael and Sylvia where I'm gonna keep 40-foot ladder. They don't let you to put anything in the backyard or in front yard. Where are you gonna keep that? And if I'm able to go, which I disagree, I don't want to go. I go somewhere if I cannot go. If I have other options, I don't have to take my 40-foot ladder and go there 2 times or 3 times or 5 times a year. That is not an option. He cannot tell me I can go with a ladder or I can go through my roof. And to tell the truth, you guys, which I understand, if you really, really watched his presentation, if he complains about flower plants in my window, which I don't know one civilized architectural understanding person to complain about that. If those 3 bucks, flowers, beautiful blah, underneath the window, bothers them, you know, so it's just a smear. They don't want anything. They don't want anybody to do anything because they want to feel powerful and to not let individuals, people, to make better choice to live better lives and to get around their townhomes in easy and not dangerous ways. So when they complain about this, I mean, I don't know what to say. But we are like, if you guys, these things bothers you so much, I 100% I'm on board. Give me an idea. I'll do it differently, but I'm going to go in the roof through my window or through my whatever is there. So if this niche, 2 feet each, 2 feet bump up, makes you so mad, I don't want you guys to have problems, let's discuss it. Tell me an idea. I'm going to do it. You know, it's no problem. I'm not saying it has to stay this way, whatever. We lost money. I'm going to do it again. For me, it doesn't matter. You know, I want everybody else to be happy. I don't want you guys to have problems with HOA people. If you see, I remove the tiles in the roof. I put the roof TPO like every other house there. I'm in board with you guys. Give me an idea. Give me a design between you and us, and I can do it whatever you guys want. You know. Still, I never gonna take my right to go to my roof in either way. And if it's 2 feet space, I'm gonna crawl and I'm gonna go to it. I'm not gonna put 40-foot ladder to go in roof. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think we need to hear from the affected parties, and then we can have some discussion. So, staff, do you guys have a list of affected parties? If you guys want to call them out and go through them, and then
Sure.
Not the least. It's just one person.
Is
That was the first time too. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're okay. I honestly don't know how many there are.
It's just one.
List, so we will see. So Cam, do you have that list that you could do?
Yes, there's multiple. First, okay. With the cluster president, if she has an additional comment, she was an affected party on the application.
Okay, I want to remind, now that we are into the affected parties, is it 2 minutes or 3 minutes, Cam?
If the person is representing a group, it's 5. If they are representing themselves as an individual member, it's 3.
3, okay. So the cluster president is representing a group. So you have 5 minutes, Sylvia, if you need it all. But I don't know if you have anything to add, but your time starts now. Is she unmuted?
Yes.
I'm on. Okay, thank you. Michael Poss did a fantastic presentation. It was exactly what we all talked about. Just to add to it is that we realized that this construction was being done last July without any pre-approval from the board. No application was presented to us. At that time, we did write a cease and desist letter to the resident, the owner, to stop construction, but still they did not present anything to the board. So that was one concern that we did have. And the resident did come to my door and explain about the construction. And I told him I was on the board and that he had to come and present this project to us so that we could clearly explain to them why this was not approved by the HOA here. And but that was not done. That was not communicated to us. So that's just something I wanted to add that we did write to the to Reston Association. But that is, other than that, Michael Poss explained it very well. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next we have Sean Joyner.
Sean, are you on?
Hi, I just wanted to echo Sylvia and Michael's statements, and then I wanted to point out that we just heard from the applicant that they'd be willing to work with HCA and RA to come up with a design that would be an acceptable one that would fit within design guidelines that would allow them access to the roof to do roof maintenance that did not involve the 2-foot bump out. And as far as the flowers are concerned, you know, throughout Hickory cluster and in many clusters throughout Reston, you're not allowed to make any adjustments or alterations to the exterior of your dwelling without approval from RA, and that includes a signature from the cluster as affected or unaffected party status. And both the roof bump out and the flower pots were added without any approval and without any application, without any discussion with HCA or any attempt to work with us or to work within existing guidelines. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sean.
Next is Sarah
Kim,
Teagle.
Hi. Yeah,
Sure.
this is
Just
Sarah.
reminder, just 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't need that much because I really don't have much to add in addition to what Mike and Sylvia said. It's it's really frustrating because he has, I mean, they're very well aware of all the rules and all the steps and all the approvals, and they just think they don't apply to them. They apply to everybody else in the cluster. And also, I can only add that I don't think I would have, I mean, I got to put up, I guess, curtains and stuff, but I don't think I would have gone to the very expensive bathroom that I'm now redoing again, if there was going to be a patio so close by. And I can't see any of the people directly across from me when I'm in my bathroom, so I don't think that was an accurate depiction of the privacy issue, but Mike pretty much covered it.
Great, thank you.
We had more, but I don't believe they are here. Is Marcus in attendance? If you could raise your hand. I don't see Marcus here, so.
Okay. So from a board perspective, I'm going to go around the room, just kind of get a feel from anybody with any thoughts. So let's start with Mike B.
I don't have any other further comments or questions at this time. Thank you, Michael.
Yep. Dan, you have anything?
At the last meeting we discussed this, part of the conversation was about a medical need to access the roof. And that's not clear to me from what's been discussed so far today, if that is still an ongoing issue or not. So that's one point that we may want to ask I guess in this case, the applicants. Secondly, if they are willing to make some adjustments in some fashion, then we may want to defer action on this until the different parties can discuss this and come back to us with hopefully a compromise application. So that's my thoughts for now.
Okay. Jim, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think submitting a revised design that eliminates the pop-up and is more sympathetic to the architecture that's there originally. And it sounds like the cluster is willing to work with them on it.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree. Karen, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm concerned that they have apparently, there's no indication that they have applied for a building permit for any of the work that they've done. So, you know, there's some question about the treatment on each side, the firewalls, and anyway, it's just something that I believe, according to the guidelines of the cluster, that they were required to do that.
Okay. And Bruce.
To me, it's clear a violation of the cluster standard for the pop-up at the door. But what I don't see either in the cluster or in the Reston cluster guidelines, anything that addresses the boxes. So have a clear view of understanding of the problem with the roof. I don't know, and I don't know if the others on the committee have a specific guideline that we should be discussing regarding the flower box.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think the pop-up, I think, needs to be worked with the cluster. Hopefully they can find a solution that brings it back, that roof line back down and into compliance kind of with the original design intent. I think it was thought out not enough before they did it. And it to me, even the door doesn't meet Hickory cluster guidelines. I mean, they have very strict door guidelines as well. And the door that's in there doesn't meet it either. So I think there needs to be some significant rethought for that. I agree on the planter boxes. To me, they're a temporary thing. I think what we said in the approval that they got for the boxes that they needed to, or we could put in an approval that they need to remove them when they leave. To me, I don't think they take away from the architecture. To me, they have some nice flowers in them. They clearly keep them maintained. I don't have personally a problem with those. I don't think they aesthetically impact the front elevation like this upper level addition does. So with all that said, does anybody have a motion, or do you guys want some clarification on, do we want some answers from the applicants on any of those questions you guys maybe had, or do we have a motion? Or
I'll make a motion to approve the flower boxes and to deny the application for the roof door and construction.
okay, we have a motion for an approval for the boxes, and then we have a motion for denial, not deferment, correct? Just denial.
Denial, because from my perspective, it's crystal clear. I'm pleased, and I hope that they will work out something, but I think the cluster has the right to the enforcement, and that if their applicant wants to quickly come up with an alternative, they could bring it to the cluster and work that out.
Okay, so we have a motion and do we have a second anywhere? I will second that motion. So we have a motion and a second. Does everyone understand the motion and the second?
Can I ask for one point of clarification? If you're going to disapprove the roof modification, establishing a timeline for compliance, either resubmittal or compliance would be awesome.
Okay, Bruce, do you have a thought on a timeline for resubmittal of a
resubmittal within 6 weeks? So they're gonna have to work it together, is my understanding.
Let's say, yeah, 45 days. Let's just turn it into
45 days, fine.
so it's a little bit easier.
That's fine.
All right, so we have a timeline added, so I will accept that amendment to the motion for 45 days. Does anybody have any further discussion?
In terms of as a vehicle for choosing this route versus a deferment on the action for the rooftop modification, does it make a difference from the standpoint of the board's action here? Obviously, we want to work to some sort of solution that's workable for both parties, et cetera. So I'm just asking the question amongst the board here. Is the denial the way to do this as opposed to a deferment like you just kind of asked for clarification, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I was thinking of deferment is that it gives them an opportunity to look at it with the cluster and then come back with, all the same parties involved. I don't know. I think this came straight to full board if I recall correctly, staff. Anyways.
Cam is nodding.
Yeah, that's correct.
So more than likely a new application would come back to full board anyway. Okay. So it probably, I think, is it easier, staff, to defer it from a paperwork standpoint? I guess what I worry is if we defer it and then that we just go back to the original window setup that was there, let's say, but it's an operable window versus a fixed window. I don't even know if they were operable before. I have no idea, but let's say that's the solution. That wouldn't even, I guess it would probably need an application anyways. But if there's a deferred on the table, kind of how does that sit, Cam?
I believe a disapproval would be much more clear.
Okay.
Fair enough. Appreciate it.
All right. Any other further discussion?
So if somebody wanted to just say no to the whole thing, that would be a different.
That would be a different motion, correct? So
Yeah,
you would vote. You would vote
And we
against.
already
this
have
motion.
one on the floor.
Correct. So we have the motion on the floor. So if you want to vote against it, you're more than welcome to. We're in further discussion. So if you want to explain what your rationale behind wanting to deny both items are, you can share.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other further discussion?
I'm all set. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. All right. So what I'll do is I'll do a yay, nay, and an abstention. So all those in favor of the motion say yay. So we got, I'm a yay.
Aye, yeah.
Bruce is aye. Karen's an aye. Mike's an aye. Jim, are you aye? Or
Aye.
nay? Aye. And then Dan, nay or aye?
I'm gonna abstain.
Abstain. Okay. All right. So we have a motion passes of denial 5-0 for the rooftop modification, but the planter boxes are approved 5-0 with one abstention as well. All right. Moving on to application J, which is 11817 Triple Crown Road. This is also an appeal. This one is Mr. Platt.
We are unmuting Mr. Platt now. Mr. Platt, can you hear us?
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello. Good evening, Mr. Platt. Just a reminder, we're looking for a misapplication of guideline or new information.
Thank you. I think in this situation, it's a moving target and there are both situations involved. At the last, there were statements by the applicant that this was a preliminary application and they asked for tentative approval. And they asked for approval to file building permits, and that was where we had some difficulty. So we submitted a request for an appeal. We were very grateful that Karen Noel actually came out and did a site visit and raised the concerns that we've been raising for quite some time about the issue that Mike B. raised earlier in an earlier situation regarding no drainage to leave the property in question. For some time, there have been serious issues about water coming off of the Berry's property, the drainage situation. We've already put in $50,000 to contain largely the water coming off that property onto the RA property between our houses and draining onto us. And the point of their application was to add something by nature of a significant pool and patio, which is a vanity addition to their house because there are many pools and patio and open areas in Reston. They'd like to have it, but it shouldn't be at our expense. So specifically, we are concerned because of what I said at the last meeting, that misapplication of a design guideline, which has to do with not putting water onto a neighboring property that doesn't belong there, and also screening by vegetation and by fencing pools, both specific guidelines. And the most important thing to begin with is the fact that it says right on the application to the DRB that if the application is incomplete, it must be returned. It will be returned to the applicant. It doesn't say may be returned. So conceptual approval of an application that was incomplete was fine. We didn't have an issue with that. We did have an issue with them, the applicant asking you all for approval to go and file building permits. There are additional facts that have been disclosed in part in the subsequent weeks, including some that just came to light this past weekend regarding the issue of screening and regarding the issue of site and grading plans. Specifically, one page of a site a grading plan was submitted, which we had a consultant look at, the same professionals that looked at the last one, and they said it's clearly incomplete. It doesn't say where any of the drain pipes would go, including a proposed new one. It doesn't say anything about where the drainage plan would take the water. It does not include apparently a submission that was comporting with the Chesapeake Bay drainage conservation area plan. It's excessive to that requirement that the county and the state follow in terms of the area of impermeable surface that would be added, and may just for that reason require significant modification. And essentially, this amounts to piecemeal. It's too early or it's too late for us to submit because it's still not a complete application. It's quite clear. It doesn't have any screening. It doesn't have any drainage plan. It has one page of a 6-page report that it says itself submits as a site plan part 1. So you've got an incomplete application before you. And as far as we're concerned, the application leaves us in a position where every day or every week we have to check the DRB website to find out what else has been submitted. It's not consistent with the way in which the DRB says it does business, and it's significantly disadvantaging us. We've moved into Reston, Mr. Wood and panel, we moved into Reston 50 years ago this month. All right, we've been here a long time. We built our house with a lot of love and a lot of sweat and equity, and we moved in 32 years ago. We lived here many years without this problem. We found the prior owners before the current occupants 2 prior owners ago, and they say that the water that used to be on that property was contained on that property. That was Jim and Susie Jones, who lived there for 8 years. Essentially, what I'm saying is this is still a partial application. I don't think any kind of action could be taken tonight to approve this application or to do anything other than to require the applicant to submit a full plan. And essentially, what I'm also saying is that Mr. Newland, who actually sat in and denied us, he was in charge of the DRB at the time, we were denied any rectification of the water situation. So he has an inherent conflict in this situation by coming before you and representing this. So the same situation to you. So essentially what I'm saying is the following. You need to take a look at the overall picture and see whether the incomplete submissions to date can be satisfied at some point in the future when you could take action. We'd be happy again to work with the Berries and the architect, Mr. Newland, to come up with a suitable solution. This is not it. Mr. Newland submitted one photograph, which we were accessed to on Saturday. Okay, that's the photos he submitted, which purports to show heavy screening. If you look at his photograph, you'll see that our windows, the 3 bottom windows on our basement and the top window that face the Berries property are all clearly visible. You can see into the Berries yard from our property. We submitted 3 photographs. Which when we saw this on Saturday, we submitted, which was added late to the file, we submitted 3 photographs from our property, which clearly show there's no screening. And that's with full leafage. And when there's no leafage, there is no screening whatsoever. If the staff could please show our 3 photographs, you'll get the point. The central thing is we are grateful. Please go to the photograph. Go to the 3rd photograph. I think that says the whole story. Here is the photograph with fully, where you can see the yard. Look at the 2nd one too. All 3 of these, and the first one is taken from upstairs. We can see into the yard. There's no screening. They don't propose any screening. And between that and the fact they have yet to submit a grading plan, and look, they're proposing to cover the balcony and to add yet another drain to this heavy thing. We are maintaining this channel, which largely takes the Berries water. because they diverted the water from the way it was originally. So if the DRB wants to do the right thing, follow what Mike B says. You're supposed to not have the drainage leave your own property. For a little bit of money, the Berries could at any point have, and they could still take their water from their drains to the back of their property and move it straight in and incorporate it into a plan that they would submit that would satisfy the DRB's own requirements for submission. We are asking simply to be treated like everybody else. These situations where this piecemeal submission of partial information is not acceptable. It doesn't follow the guidelines. This is all new information, and it's a misapplication of the guidelines and your basic requirements. We're simply asking you to do what your own guidance says and to follow the Reston covenants and the DRB protocols. That's why we're asking for an appeal of the tentative approval, only as to the permission that you gave to have that Mr. Newland asked for permission to file building permits. We want to keep it tentative and allow and ask the applicant to submit a complete plan and not consider it again until they do. They have to submit something that meets all your requirements. Otherwise, it says right on your form, page 1 says that incomplete application will be returned to the applicant. That's what we're asking you to do.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Platt. So I want to get some clarification from staff and from what my understanding is. So this is the appeal to our, I guess essentially we did something unique where we didn't give conceptual approval. We gave tentative approval with future submission, but there's obviously, I know I was a big proponent of the grading stormwater plan. From what it sounds like, we still don't have that. Correct. We also still don't have a landscape plan. We still don't have a lighting plan. So we're not looking at this application for those at this moment. We're trying to we're basically under the impression that Mr. Platt is requesting us to deny or to appeal the basically notion that we gave them, it's not conceptual approval, but you're appealing this decision here, which I understand what you're trying to say. I guess what's tricky is them applying for building permit, just from a standpoint, is it's all at risk for them, because if they come back to us and we don't like the plan that they have, they would have to go in and revise their building permit, assuming that it doesn't meet.
We have no issue with what you just said, Mr. Wood.
Okay.
Our only concern was conceptually, if they came in for conceptual approval, we have no issue with this.
I guess what you're tricky is you're saying it's harder to track the process because you don't know when basically the grading plan or the lighting plan or the landscaping plan would come back before us, because you wouldn't be notified.
Yeah, and we want it all at once, as you require for everybody else. And this is a significant thing. We've already spent $50,000 and countless hundreds of hours on this thing, and it's time it ended. Mr. Mike B said it best. No drainage to leave the property in question. Whether they can achieve that or not, at least they let them make a good faith effort to try.
Correct. And I think I believe they've hired an engineer. With the one sheet they've provided obviously is not complete. Obviously, there obviously are a bunch of pages missing. I look at these all day. I have a couple projects going similar that have these, and they don't have any of the information that I would be looking for at the moment.
Thank you.
So I completely agree with you. In reference to the appeal, though, to me, I'm still fine with the approval that we gave them, because they only have basically a conceptual approval. Basically, they have an at-risk, they're allowed to go submit. I mean, you could submit for a building permit before you even come to the DRB technically, but you're not allowed to start work until the DRB approves it regardless. So some people put the horse before the cart, but right. It's not, we can't tell them whether to submit for building permit or not, right? They could go without our approval regardless.
Agreed.
So hold on. What? How do you get muted? So, does anybody? Let's see. Let's go around the room. I know this one is new to you, Jim, but do you have anything to add with the appeal that they're searching for?
I'm not familiar with the project, but like you, I am used to looking at grading plans and stormwater management plans, engineered plans, site plans, all of this. And the county is also, there are very clear guidelines on, as far as the Chesapeake Bay, Act is concerned. And we don't see any of that here. Even on a conceptual level, wouldn't you need to at least see some type of grading plan and how you address the stormwater management?
Yeah, I think what happened here, just because I know you weren't here, Jim, is that basically the homeowners, it's been a process going through, with the architect and getting everything put together. So I think they wanted to make sure that we were okay with the design overall from an aesthetic standpoint, and from a massing standpoint to be able to move forward. I think we were okay with having the landscape and the grading plan come after the fact as requirements, because I feel the site is big enough that they're going to be able to manage it all on the site, just with my experience. And I think that's where we were that's how we kind of led toward it. And then we can still, work with them and say, hey, no, the water, is going too much here. Let's get it more focused toward the back of the property, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm hoping that staff, have you heard from Mr. Newland about a full site plan being submitted? I know I had mentioned it to Lisa and she had said that they would upload it, but obviously that one sheet is not enough. Have you guys heard any more from them?
It's my understanding that Mr. Newland specifically provided that one sheet for a reason, and that's the only answer I have for that.
Okay. So it sounds like they still have not completed it, even though they may think they have. I think our feedback is that obviously there's no landscape plan from what I have seen, with no plant schedule or anything like that. Lighting plan has yet to been provided as well. So I think they're still kind of in that conceptual approval ballpark, in my opinion. So, Mike B,
Wood, given that, I will withdraw the appeal with the understanding that you really are not expressing approval of them going forward with filing building plans, even if it's at their own risk. That was the one place where I had concern, because usually if you haven't given approval, there's no statement from the DRB that says basically you're okay if you submit these things.
Yeah, I think this one is unique because it's so big. So I think what I would like is staff, as soon as we get those plans, they're going to come before a full board again, just like we saw the main project. And as the affected party, Mr. Platt, you will be notified and can come to that meeting and have your 3 minutes to give your opinion on what they submit. Staff, am I correct in that order of operation?
The Berry family is prepared to present their version of what you have requested after this appeal is either approved or disapproved.
So there actually is an application on for tonight, but there is no grading plan, there's no lighting plan, there's no landscaping plan, there's no new information from what I've seen, unless I'm not looking at the right application.
We communicated the concern, and dependent upon how the appeal went, the Berries were prepared to review the application de novo tonight, or to provide the requested information from what the DRB asked for also tonight. And it's my understanding that the items that you're requesting, Mr. Newland will speak to and address each of those items related to the grading plan and stormwater management, the landscape plan, the lighting plan, and then the updated elevation drawings to address the window placement, removal, railings, fencing, and screening.
I guess I'm confused at that because that information doesn't exist. So how are we supposed to, are they trying to say that they don't want to provide the plan because?
No, what they're saying is that they have the information that they'd like to vocalize to the DRB, but ultimately that information is separate from Mr. Platt's appeal request. So if Mr. Platt is,
if we deny the appeal, then at the end of the day, we don't hear from them, and then they still have to bring forward that information to another meeting, correct?
correct, but they are prepared to respond to what the DRB requested tonight.
I mean,
But even if we deny the appeal,
correct.
Yeah,
but
full
there's no,
approval.
there's no new application. They already have an approval, a conceptual approval. So I'm confused. I mean, I get that they want to vocalize what they have, but they haven't provided what we asked for. So there's no reason to talk to them until they have what we asked for.
And additionally, I for one would like the opportunity to review these drawings. This is a significant set of drawings that we asked for and additional details. I'd like more than, on the fly to be looking at these things personally.
Yeah, I guess can staff point me to what you guys are talking about as where is the new information? Are we in J? There's like 4 attachments. So there's JA, there's JB, there's JC, there's JD, and that's it. So what am I supposed to be looking at?
So, I mean, I don't want to speak and explain their application for them,
right.
But if you want me to kind of go into what I have seen myself, I'm happy to do it. For example, the lighting, if you go to page, let me pull
Point of order. We still deal with the appeal before we're getting into this.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So does anyone have anything else on the appeal? Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
The thing that's concerned that I'm not really understanding is that I thought that what we were approving was primarily the changes to the house.
The deck.
That didn't really have anything particularly to do that would determine what happened outside. And I don't, but I think the idea was that they could go ahead with, changing their fireplace and, putting a new roof and things like that. So I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think in the future we need to just call it a conceptual. I think what was tricky is, like you said, we gave them that approval without the outdoor information because they wanted to move forward with the roofing and other stuff like that. So they wanted to have kind of a firm decision from us on whether we like the design. So I think that's kind of where it muddied the water a little bit.
Yes.
And I think, to me, it's still there. Dan, did you have something to add?
Oh, I was sort of trying to agree with Karen, but then I think she made a slightly different point than I did. But going back to Mr. Platt's presentation, he said he was willing to repeal this because we did not express approval of the application without the details that are in question. So I think we confirm that with him. If so, then the appeal goes away and we're done with this for the night.
Yeah,
otherwise, we can take action on the appeal.
That's how I look at it as well.
I agree with Dan.
Bruce, do you have anything before we?
No, I agree. If the applicant has the appellant has withdrawn the appeal, then I don't think we have anything else on the agenda on this item.
Well, I think he was willing to withdraw it. I don't know.
Well, I guess we're asking him since he's here.
Officially, Mr. Platt, do you want to officially withdraw your appeal and understand that you will get all that information?
With the understanding that there's going to be no consideration of an incomplete application following my withdrawal, I have no issue with this.
Okay.
That's the concern. I do not want something ramrodded through with partial pieces with nobody on the DRB having a chance to look at it. And we don't want any more piecemeal before the fact or after the fact applications submitted. You all have a standard, and all you have to do is tell people either it's good enough for StarKist or it isn't. We return it until you're finished. Come back to us for more than conceptual approval when you're ready to address our concerns.
Correct.
That's all I'm saying.
All right. So you're withdrawing your appeal?
If you agree that there's no more consideration tonight, because there's nothing to.
I agree. We're going to go to the next. I'm going to go to the next Tall Oaks
Thank you.
Assisted Living.
Then I have no issue, and thank you very much, all of you, for listening.
Okay.
So are we
go ahead, Karen.
Are we going to negate what we did with the interior and
No, so because to me,
No.
if the appeal is that approval technically it stands until they get us the more information that we want.
Yep.
And I know the Berries are requesting to chat. The problem is that the appeal has been removed, so they're not on the agenda tonight. I'm just going to say there's not enough information here to make the decision one way or the other for the stormwater plan. There should be slope percentages on this patio. Which way is it sloping? Where are the underground ground spouts? There's no landscaping plants called out. There's no lighting cut sheets on any of the lights that are being added or removed or put anywhere. Is there pool lighting? There's a lot missing. So
because they've actually shown the removal of some very critical trees. So
yeah, so I think I'm fine with just moving on to the next application. So I don't know if we need a motion for anything, staff or Anthony, Tony. Do you have a?
It appears that Mr. Platt has withdrew his appeal, and so technically, no, there's no need for a motion.
Additional.
Okay. All right. So we will move on to the next application. Moving on to application K, which is Tall Oaks Assisted Living.
Can I make one small comment, though? I'm not sure if this would be acceptable or not, but it seems to me that if the Berry family was under the impression that what they submitted was in fact complete, is it appropriate for the DRB to allow a small amount of time to have them discuss what all you are looking for specifically to review, so that when they come back for DRB final approval, let's say, that they are more prepared?
I mean, personally, no, because our decision letter was very clear of what we needed, and they haven't provided it. So I don't know how else to be clearer than that. I mean, whatever. I don't see any new information besides that one site plan. The rest of it is all exactly what we've already reviewed. And staff can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't even know how that one site plan got inserted where it got inserted. It's like inserted very haphazardly at the very end of the same presentation that we already viewed. So I'm just a little confused at what, there's no plants called out. There's no grading or drainage plan. There's just not enough here to review. So I just request them to provide what we asked for from the original decision letter. I think that's at the end of the day, the appeal's been withdrawn. So I think we're moving on. I think unless someone else has something else to put in there.
I just have one question. There are already some problems we have with the drawings that they have submitted. Do we want to just let them continue with it, or do we want to express some of the things that we already see that might not be acceptable? Or anyway, this is a question.
I just think to me, there's no point to look at it, just because I don't see what they're doing. They just don't have any new information than what they've already provided. So they didn't provide what we asked for at this rate.
Mr. Chairman, the only item that was on the agenda tonight was the appeal. The appellant has withdrawn the appeal. I'd say that item is over. Let's stop discussing it. When they submit their full application, we'll review it then.
Okay, agreed. All right, moving on. Tall Oaks Assisted Living. Application K. They are looking to do some parking lot modifications.
We have Sarah Mariska presenting, I believe. Sorry, we're unmuting Sarah.
All right, can you all hear me?
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for being patient. Welcome to the full design review board. So
thanks for having us.
Yours is the only non-appeal, so you're easy. So just present away.
Will do. Well, I'm Sarah Mariska. I'm here on behalf of Tall Oaks, and also with me tonight are John Albert with the Assisted Living Facility, as well as Monica Hawkins and Aaron Vincent with Walter L. Phillips, so that between the group of us, we could hopefully answer any questions that you all might have. We are seeking conceptual approval with the full understanding that we would need to come back at a later time as we finalize the design of this proposal. I'll give a brief background to expand a little bit on our submission, and then we can answer any questions that might come up. I think everyone's very familiar with this facility. It's been there since 1988, and there are currently 152 beds and 48 staff members on site at any one time. But the facility only has 44 parking spaces. So we were in a position of benefiting from surplus parking spaces at the adjacent Tall Oaks Village Center for many years. But as care needs of residents have increased over the years, the parking needs have increased as staffing levels have increased. And with the redevelopment of the adjacent Village Center, we are in a position of trying to figure out how we can remain operational with that loss of parking. We have spent a lot of time thinking about how to accommodate additional parking in a way that balances the cost implications, the site modifications, as well as the impacts to the adjacent property owners. So I want to just highlight a couple of things that were part of our decision-making process. One is that there is a very large swath of mature trees, as well as a stormwater management facility along Wheelie that we did not want to touch. There's also a very large conservation easement on the property that we are not proposing to modify in any way. And then we are actually asking Fairfax County for a parking reduction beneath what would actually be required under the ordinance, so that we are proposing only the number of spaces that we need to remain operationally viable. We are also proposing, as part of these changes, to reconfigure the parking in front of the facility, which would include some additional tandem spaces that are not currently there. And then we also are proposing an additional amount of parking in the rear of the facility. We're very sensitive to the concerns that have been expressed by the adjacent townhouse community. We reached out to them early. We remain available to continue conversations with them. I think that the concerns that they are primarily expressing are with respect to screening as well as drainage. I want to highlight a few things, and then we can certainly answer additional questions that they might have. We are keeping the existing trail in almost as much of the same location as we can, which ensures that there is a protection of screening between the townhouses and the assisted living facility. I also want to highlight that for the several portions between the assisted living facility and the adjacent townhomes, there's about a 2 to 4 foot grade difference, such that the assisted living facility sits beneath the townhouses. What we are proposing, and it's probably hard to see on this image on the screen, but what we are proposing in this kind of shared property line is a retaining wall that would be approximately 2 feet on average in height. On top of that retaining wall would be an approximately 6 foot tall board-on-board fence. And then behind that fence, we would be preserving landscaping and supplementing that landscaping. So really the view that we are trying to achieve is that there would be preserved trees plus the proposed trees plus a fence, such that we are working as much as we can to mitigate those impacts. In terms of drainage, as I mentioned, the assisted living facility is situated lower than the townhouse residences, so water is not going to be leaving our site and adversely impacting the adjacent townhouses. But even so, we are proposing an additional storm sewer system in the additional parking in the rear of this property, so that any runoff that may be occurring today, any existing draining issues, would hopefully be improved as a result of this project. So we're sensitive to that concern and hoping that with this proposal, we're able to address any issues that might exist. And then finally, we are cognizant that we will need to return to this board for final approval on elements that are not included in the submission, such as the bike racks, the flagpole, the specifications for the retaining wall, the fence. We are here tonight seeking conceptual approval, and we look forward to continuing the conversation beyond tonight with the DRB as well as with the adjacent property owners. And then I looking to John, Monica, and Aaron, if there's anything I may have omitted, maybe pop that into the chat or indicate that there's something that I missed, but I think that captures our thoughts and our intent.
Okay.
This is John. I think you covered everything just fine. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
So the only question I have right off the bat before we go around the room is RA have an easement through this for the path, and has RA been consulted and reviewed this? Is Larry on the call tonight?
Larry is not on the call.
Do we know if we have an easement there for that? I think it's I don't know, is the blue trail? I mean, I walk up this trail almost every single day now that it's been nice, and come up right through here, and then I get dumped into the parking lot up higher. But isn't that a Reston Association trail?
Hi, this is Aaron Vincent with Walter Phillips. We're the engineer on the project, and I can speak to that a little bit. It is generally part of the RA network. Based on our survey of the property, we are not seeing an easement. Okay. But it is certainly part of the network, and this proposal plans to continue that link in the network.
Okay, and then my second question is on the same impact. So with the increase of stormwater runoff, I know we've done a lot of stream restoration down right below this property, all along the stream there. Where exactly is the main, I guess, dump point? Are we trying to tie down into that? Are we having some sort of controlled release? What exactly is happening there?
So and Sarah, feel free to cut me off if you want to speak to this, but
what
we're proposing to do, and on the view you can see here at the very top, there's a sort of a dashed in elliptical shape at the sort of top middle there. That's an existing stormwater pond. And what we found as we looked into drainage and stormwater management for this site is that pond was originally designed to treat runoff from our site and the former Tall Oak Shopping Center site. And so as we evaluated that pond for suitability for continued use, what we found is it has additional stormwater management. It has additional detention capacity. And so we are collecting all the stormwater runoff from our rear parking lot and throughout the existing parking lot and piping it to that pond where it would, and then it would continue to outfall into the existing stream channel at the bottom of the hill.
Okay, great. Okay, those are just more kind of clarifications I wanted to get. I know we have some affected parties on that I need to hear from. So is that all you guys have from a presentation standpoint for the moment? We'll obviously come back to you guys once we hear from the affected parties.
Sure.
So staff, do we have a list of the affected parties, or you guys can go through them and who's on?
Yes.
All right, great.
We have
So just a reminder, if you're representing a group, you get 5 minutes. If you're a single homeowner, you have 3 minutes. So I'm sure staff knows which is which, and they will coordinate.
We have Michael Byrne, who is the cluster representative for Villas.
Trying to unmute
there.
him. There we go.
Hello. I'm the secretary of the Homeowners Association, the past president. And I just wanted to say, first of all, that we are sympathetic to the plight of our neighbor, the Tall Oaks Assisted Living Center. For many years until the pandemic last March, we were using their conference room for all of our monthly meetings and for our annual meetings. They've been very nice to us. They've been a very good neighbor. And we understand what's happened to them because it's also happened to us. So what's happening to both of us is the encroachment of the Tall Oaks residential development, which is has had an impact in terms of space for both of us. And we've lost a canopy of trees that was very important to us in our top sector. When they expanded the parking lot for the commercial center at the what used to be our village center is now not. And at the same time, we were losing these protective trees. We also lost trees on our property because we lost the root structures and they began to lean toward our parking lot. So we had to have them removed, and we actually had to invest in a landscape project to try to buffer between the commercial strip and the top quadrant of our development. So we're faced with the same situation now in terms of losing a stand of trees that right now provide cover between our playground, which we're revitalizing right now, and the parking lot, as well as the added privacy that homeowners have with these trees that will be removed. At the same time, you know, unlike the surprise loss of our tall oak canopy at the top of our quadrant, we've had advance notice, and we've had thank Sarah very much, and also the folks at Tall Oaks for bringing us over back in the summer when during the pandemic, we took a tour of the site. We understand what they're trying to do. Our concerns are obviously losing our tall oaks. You know, this what used to be, or what is essentially the beauty of our natural environment, and also what it brings to the drainage problem. You know, with trees absorbing water, we don't have a lot of drainage problems in that section of our quadrant. In other sections of the cluster, we do. So we don't know what the impact will be, but we want to, you know, first of all, appreciating the great communication we've had from the folks at Tall Oaks. Our goal is to work cooperatively with them to extend the landscaping to protect and enhance our homes and the quality of life of our residents. We're interested to see the details that will be discussed. We were trying to follow the drawings, but one of the things that when we lost our trees at the top part of the quadrant, a lot of complaints to the folks at Stanley Martin Homes, at least resulted in an agreement for them to help us defray some of the costs of the added landscaping. I'm not sure what we're going to need. I know we're going to need something. It's right up against two of our homes. I mean, at the end of that section, where essentially is the driveway that goes into the parking lot. So, you know, we look forward to continued conversations, and I'm sure we'll be able to work out something. I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware that we are right next to this parking lot, and it will have an impact on us as a neighborhood, and also individually for homeowners. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other affected parties speaking tonight, Kim?
Yes, we do. Noel Miller.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Thanks to the board. I know it's been a long night. And thanks to Tall Oaks, again, as Michael said, I'm so very grateful to have been included in this planning session. I think I am right up against where the driveway will be. I am the last unit, so the end unit. You can basically see me right in the center of the drawing. I am the townhome unit right there, yep. And what my concern is, the fence line will be right kind of against or right alongside my house. And I'm really already kind of the way that the grading is, it funnels some of the water down the hill, and a lot of it flows kind of down the hill on the other side and over the retaining wall. But I guess I'm worried that if there's a fence on top of the retaining wall, that it will create a funnel and just kind of come right in between that fence and my house and just erode that hillside and come right down into the parking lot where my cars are, you know, right alongside my house. And that I think will affect my foundation as well in the long run. So really, I guess my only reason for being here, yes, I'm totally worried about loss of privacy, but I think my first thing is really that drainage in between the fence and our house. So, you know, that's part of my concern. I'm very excited to hear what we determine is best in terms of privacy and plantings as well. But thank you, you guys. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
That's it.
Cam, that's it.
Affected parties. Yep.
All right, great. All right, so let's open up the discussion. So I guess we'll start off with Jim. Do you have any thoughts on this? Any questions for the applicant?
I'm looking at the image that's on the screen right now, and the amount of tree removal, it looks like about half of the trees are smaller trees, and then the larger ones I mean, obviously the fence and that I think addresses the privacy issue, but the as the lady had just mentioned, the pond is over on the other side of the property there.
Yeah, we can you can keep thinking about it. If you have any specific questions, and we can come back to you.
No, I need to look at this further.
Okay. Mike B, did you have any questions or comments?
Again, just for clarity, we're talking about a conceptual approval, correct? Obviously, there's lots more to come. So we're talking about some additional details with regard to what our plans are for stormwater, you know, the other drainage characteristics, et cetera. But again, conceptual approval, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I think was the civil engineer on here? I thought they had spoken earlier. Okay. Hey, are we at a stage where some of these things are starting to get flushed out a little bit? Is there, could he or she speak to that a little bit?
If we
Yeah.
could unmute
Mr.
Aaron
Vincent is
Vincent,
right there.
that'd be great.
Perhaps. There. Ooh. Camera's on. Go. Now we're live.
Everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Technology is hard for me, apparently. Yeah, we have taken a pretty close look at these issues. I'll speak to drainage first, and then I can speak to trees. Based on what we're seeing in terms of the topography and the existing drainage conditions, I think I certainly understand Ms. Miller's comment. I guess I'm having a hard time seeing how we end up creating a drainage issue on their property. There is a sort of a ridge out of a high point that runs between the Tall Oaks property and the Villas de España property, which actually is pretty convenient about keeping a lot of their drainage heading towards them and our drainage heading towards them. It's not toward us. It's not perfect, right? So I can see how a fence, if not properly maintained, could potentially create some clogging that could eventually create some drainage issues. I guess what I would suggest on that is that we can come up with a fence design that I think maintains the privacy, but limits the possibility that leaves and things like that could clog it, and we can leave cutouts and things like that at the base of the fence to make sure water can continue to flow through there. And then I would also add that you know, part of Tall Oaks having historically been a good neighbor is, you know, I am fully confident that if there were to be unintended issues in the future, that they could be addressed by Mr. Albert and his on-site staff. As far as tree preservation,
for what it's worth, it looks like the topo sort of helps the cause, if you will.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, the fence is going to sort of sit near a high point. So I think there's a significant amount of drainage that will head toward the fence, but I do think there are things we can do to make it so even that the fence won't hold up even the limited amount of water that may drain to it. As for the trees, I think that's a pretty good point that they bring up, and we met with them last year outside to kind of look at the tree that, you know, in the area where the parking lot is proposed to look at trees and things like that. And one of the concerns they brought up and showed us the impact to what the Tall Oaks previous development had done in terms of removing tree canopy and things like that. And so one of the things that I think is worth pointing out that the plan that's before you guys tonight is an evolved version from what we had shared with them. And so if it's possible, I don't know if you can zoom in to sort of the little elbow between our back parking lot and the townhome property line, but we've actually reconfigured our parking lot design to pull the parking lot further from our shared property line and to move the trail connection further from the shared property line. And so what we've done there is attempted to avoid some of the issues that they are experiencing with the Tall Oaks redevelopment by at the end of their parking lot where visibility could potentially be most, the buffering could be most apparent, or the lack of buffering. We've actually bumped our design out, which allows us to save roughly, I don't have an exact number, but it's somewhere in the number of 6 to 10 existing trees, some medium sized, some small, as well as shrubs and other vegetation that are in that area. And so what we've attempted to do is focus to increase tree preservation, but also focus that tree preservation right at the end of their parking lot where their visibility into the Tall Oaks property is going to be most evident.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate all those additional details. That's wonderful. Thank you. That's it for me, Michael.
Great. Yeah, just picking back off the question though, Mike. So I know we're reworking the existing parking lot some as well, Aaron, and I know we're losing some islands or whatever you want to call them per se. Is that I'm assuming all of this new impervious service area with the tandem spots and all that fun stuff, that's all been calculated in that stormwater pond just seems so small. So I just want to make sure you guys have accounted for all those additional, not just the new parking, but also the modifications to the existing site as well. That all of those have been accounted for that stormwater pond.
We have the pond. We're not showing in a lot of detail, but the pond, we were a little surprised at how much capacity it has. It's a little strange. The footprint isn't enormous, but it's actually sort of abnormally deep, if that makes sense. And I think that's a function of the slope of it having been constructed on that relatively steep slope. And so, yes, we're confident with what we're showing there. And then telling you what you already know, we've got to come back to you guys. We've got to go through Fairfax County site plan review. So in addition to us being comfortable with it, we've got several layers of scrutiny ahead of us before we start construction.
Yeah. Okay. Dan, did you have any questions?
No, my questions were actually covered by what Mike was asking about, just figuring out some of the details right there along that property line.
Okay. Karen, did you have any questions?
I do. Could you please scroll down to the drawing that has all the trees located? They're by number. And okay. So am I correct, or, I mean, is the property, are you going to clear, you're proposing to clear from all along the property line, basically? That's a question for.
With the exception of the area that I just referenced at the end of the townhome community parking lot, we are going to be clearing the majority of the trees along that shared parking lot, property line, excuse me.
And so that also, I mean, you're basically going to be taking out, I mean, there's a very large one right at the beginning as you go toward the asphalt. There's the asphalt trail, or it coming to be a road, I guess. But can you keep it where it was, please? I need to see all of the property line. So when you first drive in and before you go to the asphalt path, there's a fairly large stand that extends out away from the property line, and that would all come down. And then it narrows down a little bit as you go farther along toward the back of the site. And then there's another, so basically the where the trees are now basically kind of undulates along the property line most of the way. Is that correct?
That's correct. Sort of, there's two sort of protrusions. The first one closest to sort of furthest away from the sort of as you would first experience it as you drive into the property today. In that area, you're correct. We are proposing to remove most of those trees. I think there are a few small trees near the shared property line that we are proposing to keep, but for the most part, that the trees in that area would be removed. And then as you move toward the rear of the existing Tall Oaks building and where it undulates back out today, that is the area where we've focused some of our redesign to try to save as many of those trees as possible. So we are proposing to preserve some of those existing trees there.
Well, that's probably the best thing to do, because the problem with a mature woodland is that they don't honor property lines. You know, and the roots are basically everywhere, and they're intertwined. And so it's going to be really, really difficult to save anything. Because you can leave a tree standing, but I just see the woodland straddling that property line. And I don't know how you separate out this tree from that tree. You can't say I'm going to take the little ones out, because they're all connected to the big ones too. So, I mean, this is like, I don't know. So I think it has to be the only way you can find some areas that you can save is to save a large enough group that you're saving a whole piece of the woodland that are all interconnected under the ground.
I would agree with you, and so that was part of the thinking behind our effort to sort of focus preservation in what we think is going to be the most impactful location there at the end of their parking lot.
Well, that said, some of the best stand of all those chestnut oaks is at the beginning, where you are, you start driving onto the site and it extends out, and there's some enormous trees and very tall in that area. I mean, I went through and I actually looked at where all these numbers are, and I don't know if you can possibly salvage any of that stand there, or if you've looked at it.
We have looked at it because we agree with you. The unfortunate reality is that this concept will remove a significant amount of trees in the area you're describing,
including the next property over, not just.
Well, we don't think that's true. I mean, we have, based on our tree survey and the tree preservation efforts that we've looked at, we are confident that the trees on the adjoining property will survive. We've stopped our sort of limits of development, roughly 8-10 feet, something like that, off the property line. But to your other question, have we looked at different alternatives? We have looked at a variety of different alternatives. One including adding parking on the north side of the building, so the opposite side of the building from here. And we were told by county zoning staff that is not something that they would have been able to support because of conservation easements and other things like that. So
And it's so steep. I mean, there's a big slopes there.
Right.
Well, I will be interested in how you are able to work together and because it has to be because the woodland straddles the line. It requires a cooperative effort to pick and choose. And so I heartily support that effort.
Right. Anything else, Karen?
No.
Bruce, do you have anything?
Just a clarification, the material that we have identifies, at least the letter from Sarah identifies 66 trees to be removed. Is that now changed in what you've explained in terms of what you're gonna cut back on in terms of that one area? Just trying to get an idea of whether.
I'll just jump in, Aaron. That 66 is reflective of the plans that you have in front of you. Aaron is talking about the fact that, as we've alluded to, we have looked at a lot of different design options for the property. And that 66 tree removals is a lower number than when we started looking at the site, and actually a lower number than when we previously met with Noel and Michael and others.
Okay. So is that, in my understanding, that's more of a better case scenario from a tree preservation perspective?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm torn on this because, like I said, I do walk here pretty often, and it's a shame to turn this into a parking lot, but I understand the need. I really wish RA had kind of given, I don't even know if Larry has looked at this, but I do think it impacts us in RA and RA members substantially enough that I do feel like they should have some input as well. And have you guys looked at, so from my understanding, I now see it, the old path is going there, and then the new retaining wall, and like Karen is saying, I mean, all of those trees are coming out. It's going to substantially impact, I think, more than what is realized at the moment. I understand the need for it, and you guys, if you guys go to the county, they're the ones that would enforce, and you would need a waiver for existing parking requirements, because right now you don't need, I don't know if a ball got dropped when Tall Oaks got redeveloped basically on their end. And they said they didn't realize maybe you guys had a shared parking agreement in place. Maybe it was just a word of mouth thing back from, the 70s when they were developed together, or late 70s, early 80s, whenever it was. But you guys they're not forcing you to add parking, correct? It's just more of a need for the internal facility at the moment.
No, there is no violation or issue with respect to the county, but this is, definitely focused on remaining operational and continuing to be viable as a facility. And to be clear, we are pursuing this because we don't have any other options that we can determine. We have worked with Stanley Martin on some possibility of shared parking. We have not been able to accommodate our need. We are utilizing public on-street parking on North Shore Drive to the extent that it's available. We would not be going through this process and making these changes if we weren't really in a spot of jeopardizing the viability of the facility.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not an assisted living facility expert, so I'm not one to speak on one, but I know when my grandma was in one, I'd pull up and there, it felt like there was no one ever there, but maybe it's just a totally different, level that most of them don't have cars, but I guess, is it the staff that's driving? It's visitors that's coming in. I guess it's just a lot of pervious space to add. And so it's little, it's basically paving every corner of this corner of the site, literally, and it's just it's painful to see. So that's the only reason why I'm asking the question.
Well, and we understand. Again, we would not be going through this process or making these changes if we could conceive of a solution that was workable. I would note that, just for point of reference, under Fairfax County's ordinance, parking is based on a combination of the size of the facility as well as the staffing. And we are technically required, based on the size of this facility, to have 99 parking spaces. And with these additional spaces, we would be at 68. So we are, requesting a pretty sizable reduction, because we do not want to pave over this parking lot. We want to constrain our impacts as much as we possibly can. And we're requesting only the spaces that we would need for the facility to remain viable. So we're sensitive to your concerns and have tried to limit our impacts as much as we possibly can.
Okay. And I see the one island is remaining. Is that for the that 5G tower that I think we approved a 5G tower for this facility that's going there? That was one spot right there. We could have, let's just get rid of that thing and then we can put one more spot there. Why not, right? But anyways, jokes aside, so yeah,
Michael, I would also just add, with respect to the trail, we have spent a lot of time and effort trying to ensure that we are maintaining that connection, because I know how well used it is every day. There are lots of people out there in my experience and site visits, so I know it's heavily used. We are maintaining that connection, keeping the majority of it in its existing location. And Larry has been on the site with John Albert from Tall Oaks and has looked at this. Arborist has looked at this. We have had some of those conversations, and of course we continue to do that as our design moves forward.
Yeah, so essentially it's reworking us in front of, basically, the only downside I don't like about where it's taken the path is it's putting it like right in front of the emergency exit door, kind of at the end of the facility. So it's a little bit of a, I wish there would be a better way to locate it somewhere else. That would be kind of my only main condition or thought that I have. But otherwise, I think it's leading you nicely into Tall Oaks path system there. That then is going to go through there, and then eventually when they reopen the underpass to get back kind of down towards Hidden Creek, eventually it'll all be reopened once they're done with construction there. But and kind of connect our trail network back together there, because right now it's kind of a mess. So did anyone else have any other comments? I think they're looking for a conceptual approval tonight. Jim, did you have anything to add now that you've had some time to look through it?
Yeah, what is the paving material that's being used for the parking lot?
Right now, we are proposing asphalt in the drive aisle and parking spaces, and then there are some additional turnaround areas that we've worked through with the fire marshal. Those we're proposing to be grasscrete. So we've attempted where we can to limit the amount of asphalt we're adding.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to suggest that, if we could try and soften it that way, would certainly help.
Great. Anything else? Anybody else got anything? Nothing. Does anybody have a motion on conceptual approval? Obviously, there's still details that we need. The neighbors there's some concern, but I think they see the need that the facility is having. This is a shame when, I wish this had been addressed kind of with the Tall Oaks proposal, because I think they inherently caused this issue. And it's going to take away, that is some really nice trees and landscaping that go along that edge of the facility right now. So it's a little bit of a shame, but does anyone have a feeling, a motion one way or the other? It's just so tough, because that area is just, if it wasn't so close to neighbors, it maybe wouldn't be an issue. It wasn't impacting the trail, but it is doing all that stuff. One last question before we make a motion. How many spaces can you fit if you don't do the arm into the back there? Like if you just do the tandem spaces, rework some of the islands, it looks like you're adding, I know it's not a lot, but I know it's adding some. And then you could add, you know, maybe 3 or 4 where this entrance is going to the back. Have you guys, I know you guys looked at everything, but roughly what does that get you? You know, does it get you an extra, you know, looks like maybe 15 spaces?
So the back parking lot adds 14. Our net add here is 27. So it's just over half of our net add.
So you could get 13 spaces. Because I mean, the main expense of this is going to be that arm, right? I mean, the reworking of the existing parking lot. I mean, yeah, it's going to be money, but it's not that much. And I'm just wondering, is it like, and then you could fit 3 more, so you could potentially get, you know, 16 versus the 29 or 28, whatever you just said. You know, I know it's not exactly what you want, but I mean, obviously, any space helps. I just. And obviously, no one else on the board is looking to motion to approve it, kind of as is. I just wonder if we could restudy it where we maintain it in that one part of the parking lot, and not maybe even if it's just you remove. I guess then maybe it becomes a turnaround issue. But even if you just remove the, you know, that final arm where there's 7 or 8 spaces down there, and you just kind of have this one little extra parking spot. But I guess maybe it's a turnaround issue for a fire marshal. But I don't know why they would need to get around back there, because they can't get there now. So could we do something like that?
From a tree preservation standpoint, the most impactful leg of those 2 is the first leg. Yeah. So we lose them. We lose trees with that first leg, and as to parking, Sarah and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at this point, we really are trying to get through here with the bare minimum that we can.
Well, I'll just jump in, Aaron, and add, Michael. We actually did, the plan that's on the screen tonight that is in front of you does reflect a pretty significant rethinking of the front. We actually had almost a little mini charrette with Planning Commissioner John Carter to kind of do exactly what you were suggesting, which is how could we minimize the impacts along the property line and in the rear and get as many spaces as possible in the front. So this design reflects a fair bit of brainstorming to get to this point. And to Aaron's point, I think we really need those rear spaces to be operationally viable. I think we would be in a position of not being able to park everyone at this facility that needs to park there. And then I would also add, just for your consideration, is that you know, we are seeking a parking reduction from Fairfax County of about 31.3%. They are supportive of that request at the moment, but I do think that were we to take away the 7 spaces either on the side or in the rear, their support might evolve.
And one last data point to keep in mind that I should have mentioned earlier is that as we've gone through this process, the county fire marshal pointed out to us that really they need access to the rear of that building today. And so I think if we were to take away some of this rear access, we could create a situation where the fire marshal would tell us that they cannot properly serve this building. They've pointed out through this process that they have some concerns about how they would serve the building today. So they view this as a move in the right direction from a life safety standpoint for the residents.
Yeah, I mean, I love fire marshals. They keep me safe, but they would want to drive around every single building if they had their wish. So
one last question. The first arm going back there, not around back, but leading to it, would there be a way to rotate that access and that group of parking spaces closer to the building, which might give back that undulating tree area on the property line a little bit?
We had looked at that. It results in a reduction of about 5 parking spaces, which doesn't sound like a big number. But when we're here sort of at the bare minimum that we think we need, that becomes tough.
Yeah. And I know, I'm sure you guys have asked, and I know you guys mentioned Stanley Martin. I think Aaron, you guys did the site plan and stuff for them as well. That parking
we
garage
did
that they're
not.
putting in the condo. Oh, for some reason I thought you guys did. Maybe I'm thinking of another project. But for Tall Oaks, for those garages they have right there that are within, close eye distance, they can't, you guys can't buy spots off of them cheaper than I'm sure. I mean, they probably built it to the minimum, but
they did actually kind of get a parking reduction as part of their approval. And then we did work pretty extensively to reach an agreement for a parking license, and it's for 12 spaces, but it is not for 24-hour access. It's a pretty limited license. It's not such that it allows us to remain viable in perpetuity, which is our goal. And that was, John can weigh in, but it was not easy to get that limited use from Stanley Martin.
Right. The 12 spaces they agreed to in order to get their site plan approved was on their property, and the spaces aren't even constructed yet. The retail section of the community is owned by a different ownership group. So we're not permitted to park on that land. That's where the trees were removed. And, I just want to digress a bit. As a neighbor, we will do everything we can to, of course, keep the fence clean, make certain that the erosion is minimal. We'll do regular inspections. You let us know, and we'll address any concerns. We have very talented staff that take care of the grounds, and we pride ourselves on that. And one more thing, I know that there's currently, the fire marshal, as Aaron said, that they do require a hose drop all the way to the back of the building, right at that past the dog leg there. So, and again, we really don't want to do this. This is we're struggling as a business right now, post-pandemic. Our occupancy levels are the lowest it's ever been, and we're worried about the viability of a ongoing business, and so this is something we really didn't want to do, but we did a parking study, and we do need every space that is on this plan right now. We would love to take out some if we could, but again, we're very concerned, and we're looking at making the back parking for employees only, so we can control it a little bit more. So yeah, but again, thank you.
So does that mean that we can't actually, there's no talking about tree save somewhere along that line? I mean, it's absolutely just already done. I mean, in other words, you've done all of the work with the neighbors, and you're done. You just have to get this punched through.
I mean, I don't know if we're
no.
I'm sorry. I don't know if we're allowed to, if there is a concern down the road with trees, if something dies on the neighbor's property, if we could, assist in reforestation of their property, planting trees, working with them, we would consider that, of course.
Well, but how soon don't you need to get to that pretty soon? Or, I mean, how much more work do you have to do to figure out things like that?
Sarah, I'll defer to you on that. I mean, our timeline, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so we do, what we've presented this evening is we do have a landscape plan and kind of a preliminary proposal and some species selected, but this isn't every single tree identified in terms of species or exactly what would be saved or what wouldn't. We're close though. I mean, we have a lot of information. I mean, after where we stand in terms of overall processing is that we would need to get a PRC amendment and a parking reduction from Fairfax County. And then we, of course, would need to work with you all on these final elements. And then we also would need a site plan approval from Fairfax County. So the site plan approval, as well as the details that we would provide to you all, would have those final details that you are looking for. So I I'm deferring to Aaron and Monica, but we're probably 75% of the way there in terms of those details. And you guys can correct me if I'm misstating that.
I think you're generally right. And Ms. Noel, to your earlier question, I think we are happy to keep talking about anywhere we can maximize tree preservation and find more trees to save. And we're happy to keep talking about adding more landscaping. Even, we're happy to talk to Villas de España about adding landscaping on their property. But we're in a little bit of a tight spot here because the plan in front of you has been through so many iterations and been pushed and pulled in so many different ways that I don't think we intend to sound inflexible, but this has been a focus of ours from the beginning of this project in terms of, being sensitive to our impact to our neighbors. So
actually what you're saying is saving any trees along that property line on your side is really beyond, you've gone beyond the investigation stage, and it all has to go.
I don't know if that's exactly how I'd word it, but I would say that we have looked through so many different iterations here that I do think that we are maximizing the number of trees we can preserve along the shared property line while still meeting the bare minimum that we need to continue this facility as a viable facility.
I just have a feeling that how many ever trees you think you can save, you may not be able to. So
I would say we've done, we've done a fair amount of arborist work here, and we are confident that the trees we are proposing to save, will survive long term.
I guess I'm actually not knowing which ones those are. Do I need to go back and do the study where there are all the, I have to know what the tree number is and find out what it is that you're going to save, actually?
Yeah, it's I think we provide an inventory and we provide limits. We do not provide a clear sort of remove this tree, save this tree. We can give you that information. We can give you that information. You do not need to do that work. We can certainly do that for you.
I mean, I just think at some point we have to get down to what's really doable and what's not. And I think that there is some hope in the notion of working with the neighbor to do planting on their side. And so I don't know when you do that. Is that just a kind of a loose suggestion floating around, or is this something that can become a reality?
I'd say we're happy to commit to doing that, before we come back to you for final approval. I don't think that's something that the county would allow us to show on the rezoning plan because it's an offsite improvement, which gets muddy from a zoning standpoint, but that doesn't mean we can't do it of our own volition. So I think we'd be more than happy to work with them to come up with a landscape plan on their property before we're back in front of you guys.
But we will not be able to save a 28-inch chestnut oak, for instance, anywhere, period. So we should not imagine that there's something that we can do that we can't.
Right. The trees that we plant will be, 2 to 4 inches in caliper, and they would reach maturity over a 5 to 10 year period. But we would not be able to plant trees of the size you just referenced.
Okay. Good.
Does anyone have a motion?
I'll make a motion for final approval of the parking lot addition.
It's conceptual approval.
Are we doing conceptual approval?
Yeah, this is only conceptual approval.
And I apologize, then I will make a motion for conceptual approval of the parking lot addition as submitted.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. I feel like the parking lot and the landscape plan were not conceptual. It was the other landscape plan, I guess, the retaining walls, fence, lighting, flagpole, bicycle racks. That was conceptual. Am I mistaken on that?
Why? I mean, my understanding is that this whole thing is kind of is still conceptual at the moment. They've obviously honed out a lot of details already, but I mean, they still have to come back with the final site plan, and it might look very similar to what we're looking at right now tonight. But I think there are some final things, like we need the retaining wall details. We need, is there the fence detail that's going on top? Any additional fencing on the site? I did see there was some lighting in here, but I think they themselves, the applicant, said they were only looking for conceptual approval. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but
I'll just clarify that. I mean, we are at the zoning stage, so of course these documents do have some degree of detail for Fairfax County zoning purposes, but the final design details, as you've just mentioned, would come as part of our site planning process, which would be, final tree preservation plan, final tree selections, the design details we talked about. I mean, we are certainly willing to entertain a recommendation for final approval for the elements that you're supportive of, but my message was that we understand that there are final details that will be the subject of this group's approval in the future.
yeah, I would like to keep it all under conceptual. As you saw, I don't know if you saw the mess before us, but the previous application that we said we gave final approval for some things, and then we're looking for other concept, so I don't want to create any more messes like that. So I wanted all or nothing kind of at this moment for conceptual would be my thing. And then with any comments, obviously, that we've told you guys tonight to incorporate. So we have a motion on the table for conceptual approval. Do we have a second? Oh, we have a second, sorry, by Dan. So we have a second by Dan, and we were about to take a vote. So I will take all those in favor, say aye.
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 So I have an aye from Karen, an aye from Mike, and an aye from Dan. Any nays? I vote in a nay. Any other nays? Any abstentions? I'm missing a vote from Jim, and I'm missing a vote from Bruce.
Bruce is abstaining, I believe.
Bruce, you're abstaining?
Correct.
Okay, Bruce is abstaining, and Jim, are you voting in favor, against, or abstaining?
I'm going to vote in favor of the conceptual.
Okay. All right, so the motion passes 4-1. And yeah, so please take into consideration our comments, and we'll look forward to final approval drawings in the future.
We appreciate your input and the discussion, and we look forward to working with the VS de España. Michael and Noel, please, let's get together and we can talk more.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
All right, I don't think we have any other items tonight. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, guys. Fun night. Have a good night.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you
Thank you,
guys.
Jim,
Bye.
for joining us.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.